Welcome guys to my new office space. Joking, I'm just doing a few bits and pieces in the shed today. Just thought I'd quickly do this intro video for my latest YouTube video. So this was a job I did a little while ago. It was an absolute nightmare doing the boiler install first and then went back to do the wiring. So the whole video is basically about where we had a Y-plan system, converting it to a combi, but an S-plan on a combi because we put in a heating zone valve and underfloor heating zone valve. So where the wiring centre was upstairs in the airing cupboard, we need to move it downstairs to where the boiler was, so that we could put all of our stats and programmers and everything there, so everything is controlled in one place. So this is basically just going to be a wiring video showing how I moved the wiring centre, how I traced all the cables, and how I got this system to work, because the wiring initially was a complete mashup. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, if you like my content, please hit the like buttons, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Thanks for watching, guys. So in today's job, I'm going to be moving this wiring centre, which used to be on a Y-plan system here, so we've converted all this out as well. So there's a cylinder here, we had about 2 different shower pumps here, so loads of hot and cold services, a lot of mishmash to do under the floorboards. But yeah, all the hot and cold services are linked out, all the heating flow returns, primary flow returns are all linked out, everything's been tested. Now where we've moved the zone valves downstairs, got to take this apart, work out which zone valves, which of the cables are going to each zone valve for each stat, and then we've converted to a combi, just work out what we don't need, and then move everything downstairs. This is the boiler that's been fitted. So there was an old Baxi Solo here, got rid of that, put in an ATAG combi. We've got 2 zones here, floor heating and underfloor heating as well. So what we need to do is bring that wiring centre downstairs. So this used to be the old switch for the live earth and neutral for the boiler itself. So what we're going to be doing is that fuse spur that we saw upstairs with the wiring centre, link that out so that this now becomes our main live. I'm going to change that to a fuse spur and then put the wiring centre somewhere here, haven't quite decided yet, probably on this side, so that we can get easier access to the zone valves. Wire them both in, wire it into the boiler, and then get everything literally running from up here, and then upstairs everything should be made redundant. Okay, so we've got the wiring centre case off here. The first thing to do is to identify each of our cables, trying to work out which one's which. Let me see, can you guys see properly here? Try and move this a little bit up. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better. So obviously we've got our fuse spur here, power going in, so we know this is our earth, main earth. We've got the brown there which is looping back up to there, so that's our permanent live going to the top terminal, and neutral is, all the neutrals are here. So we know we've got our permanent live, neutral and earth. Next thing you want to identify, cables from your zone valves, because your zone valve cables will be the same on every zone valve. Where this is a 3-port valve, we know our white is for our central heating demand. We've got our grey, which would have been our hot water off, so that's now redundant, that would have been going to the cylinder stat. Orange, which is our switch live, so we know that that switch live, we've got a switch live coming from the Tado receiver. And then from here, we've got 2 switch lives here. One of them, I believe, is going to the pump cable, yeah. So that's the pump cable, which means that by process of elimination, this brown cable here, that one is our permanent, well, not permanent live, that's our switch live, which is going down to the boiler. That is going to become our permanent live. So you're going to see in a minute what I'm going to do is link our permanent live from the fuse spur from here onto this. So now that switch that we saw downstairs, that's going to become a permanent live supply. Same with the neutral, same with the earth. This will blanket off, and this fuse spur, we're going to move it downstairs and put it where that other switch was. And inside here, all we're going to do is put away go connections so that we'll link these 2 out. So that's all just going to be basically one cable going from wherever it's coming from the ring main, going straight downstairs to the boiler. Okay, so I've taken off this light switch that was here. So that's our grey twin and S. That's our grey twin and S. That's coming from the upstairs wiring centre. It's earthed onto the back plate there. That's our live going into this terminal block, which is then going into the switch. So when you turn it on, that will then send the switch live down to the end of this cable here. So this cable going in there is basically that one there. So we've got our live, neutral and earth. So all we need to do here is bring that fuse spare downstairs, and we're going to have our basic live, earth and neutral coming from the twin and earth. We're going to go into the fuse spare, and then out the fuse spare we're going to have this live, earth and neutral, which is then going to be feeding the main wiring centre. Right, so I've taken off that switch, I've linked out the live and the earth that's coming from the twin and earth upstairs, and now I'm going to go upstairs and do a continuity test just to make sure that the cables I've identified are indeed the correct ones. So let's go upstairs. Right, grab a bit of light so everyone can see. Let's sort that out. Okay, so now setting this to continuity. So yep, that's bleeping. So now technically this live and this earth, that should bleep. There we go. Right, so we know that this cable here, that's going to be our that's our twin and earth feeding that's going to become our twin and earth feeding the boiler downstairs. So I'm going to start with that. So we've eliminated our permanent live, earth and neutral, and then we can start taking this out, bringing this downstairs, and then basically wiring it back into the wiring centre. So I've got the Tado extension box off, and just having a look at the wiring diagram here on the back of here. So this is basically just like your typical twin channel programmer. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, hot water off, heating off, hot water on, heating on. So when we're looking at that, look at the back plate, so we can see that, let's start with number 1, hot water off. So that brown there from number 1 is going to this cable, which should be linked to our grey on our 3-port, which we can see that it is. So that's correct. So that is going to become redundant because we're not going to have a hot water off anymore. Heating off, there is never a heating off that we use. Number 3 was hot water on. So number 3, that black cable there, that's going to go to our cylinder stat. So that's our black one on there, going to that brown cable. If we follow it, that's going to be this cable, which is going to the brown, well, that's the old pump lead on our old cylinder stat down there. So that's going to be our hot water on. So we could potentially use that as maybe underfloor heating on, because we're going to have 2 zones. Then number 4 is our heating on for the central heating system. That's then going down to the second terminal there. That would have been linked to the common on the room stat. I'm not sure how these Tados work. I need to have a look at the other unit, but that's going to go to the common on either the room stat or the other receiver, and then coming back from the receiver, that's going to be our switch live when there's a demand, which is linked to the white, which would then trigger the zone valve or 3-port valve to send the switch live back down to the boiler to fire it up for heating mode. So I'm going to try and find the other part to this and see how this is wired up to it, and then we can work out how we're going to do it. So now we can see we've pretty much got the wiring center stripped back. So all I've got left in here is our heating thermostat control. So that's going to be our heating on, going to the room stat or the other Tado receiver, coming back from it, which is our switch, which is our call for heat, going to our white cable, which would have then triggered our orange to fire up the heating. Already undone that because that would have been our switch live back to the boiler, which is now going to become our permanent supply. And then there's just this neutral cable which is going into this twin and earth, which is probably going to be for the thermostat or the receiver. So let's go and find that. Open it up, see what's going on in there, and then we can disconnect the last bits of these cables and bring it downstairs and start working backwards from it. Okay, so the plot thickens. So this is one of the Tado thermostats. I've opened it up and I can see that the call for heat, so the common and the switch live, for some reason been linked together. That's our neutral, which has been terminated. There was nothing in this terminal block, so I'm not quite sure. 1 second, let me get the door. Yeah. Say hello, D.
Certainly, come in.
So what you saw, those brown and black cables linked together, that's basically our heating on. Where's it gone? Which was this one, coming back into the black. Because if I do a continuity test on these two now, there we go. We've got continuity between those two. So I don't understand why that's happened. I mean, the whole wiring here is a bit of a mishmash. It's not been set up correctly, so I need to sort that out. And then also downstairs we also have the underfloor heating thermostat, which is here. Now this is wired in, and that's wired into this, I believe. So that's live at the moment. I'm not sure how that's all wired in, so I need to open this up, find out what's going on here, and see how it's wired into this underfloor heating manifold. And then we can mess around with trying to find out how we can link that to that thermostat just now, and then we've got the radiator thermostat in the hallway as well. So yeah, going to be a bit more investigation on this one before we can actually figure out what's what. Right, here's a little update how far we've got so far. So I've moved the wiring center downstairs. We've taken our permanent live earth and neutral into this fuse spur. It's coming out of there, going to that junction box because it wasn't long enough to reach there. So I'm going to obviously tidy all these cables up afterwards, but this is just to get everything wired up and in position. So we've got our live, neutral, earth terminals on the first three. So that's our permanent supply. This one is then our supply back to the boiler, so that's going down and into there. The grey I've taken from the 5 cord to be our switch live. This is our Tado wiring center, so obviously we've got our neutral, live, and then we've got links between the live to each of the commons. We're going to be using the hot water side as our underfloor heating control, and obviously the heating side for our radiators. So the heating one is the black wire, underfloor heating is the grey wire, so they're coming background into the wiring center. So our black one, that's coming from our Tado, and that's going to the brown on the zone valve for the central heating. Then got the grey wire, which is coming from our hot water, but it's actually our underfloor heating. That's going to the brown, corresponding to the underfloor heating zone valve. And then from those we've got our 2 oranges, which are linked into the grey, which will then send a switch live back to the boiler to tell it to fire on, whilst we've got everything else live earth and neutral. The only other thing I need to wire in here is a condense pump, which will literally just go onto this side here. It will be another live, neutral, earth, and that will be it. And then we've got the fun part of trying to get this set up with the wireless stat, and there's the other stat for the underfloor heating, which I'm not quite sure how we're going to do it yet, because that's a hardwired one, and ideally we need a wireless one, I believe, because we're going to have a hard time running cable from here all the way back to that underfloor heating thermostat. So this is as far as we've got so far, and yeah, keep you guys updated how I get on. Okay, so the power's back on. The boiler's just fired up for preheat mode. So that is now live, going into there, going into there, going into our wiring center, and going into the Tado wiring center as well. So now I'm going to test the heating side. So I'm going to manually flick it on from here. That should make this zone valve open, which it is. There it goes. Click. And now we should see
We've got heating side open.
Heating coming on here, which we're not at the moment, unless there is a delay. It might be because, is the heating being turned off?
Heating being turned off.
Go and turn the heating on again. Let me turn this off again from here. So turn that off. Winter mode. There we go. That's why. Right, so that's on auto now.
It needs to come off comfort first, and then it'll fire.
Right. Take off comfort.
Oops. I'm just trying to remember how to do it.
You're on film as well, remember?
Hey. No, that's just turned it off. Winter. It should fire.
No, it won't. It's still on comfort mode.
No, that stays there because comfort mode is switched on.
Yeah, but still firing.
No.
Okay.
Touch your hot finger.
Right. Okay. So now the burner's gone off. That zone valve has flicked shut again. So we'll try that again. So I'll click that. That's our heating manual test. That zone valve, you can see it's opening. Click. We want to see heating demand on here. The boiler's doing something.
Diver's moving.
Central heating active. Boom. Right, so we know that our radiators, underfloor heating, the radiator zone valve has been wired up correctly. Underfloor heating side, right, let's turn this one off. That turns that off. That's going to pump over on. Now we can manually test the underfloor heating one as well. Pressing that one. There we go, that's opening up as well. Wait for the click. Click. So it went into comfort cycle. It should come off of comfort cycle. Central heating active. That is bang on because that is now responding to the underfloor heating zone valve and asking for demand to go into there. So it's going to go through its pump over on process, and then we'll fire up again for heating and send the heat down the underfloor heating pipe work. Right, so now we've got to mess around with that other stat. We've got to put the wireless stat to this as well, and then try and get everything working in sync. Okay, so now we're trying to figure out how to sort out this underfloor heating stuff. So I've opened up the switch spare here. We've got our main live neutral earth coming in. Now off of the supply side, this brown cable here, that is going to our common on here. Now when this stat here gives a demand, that will send 240 back down to normally open. And then that should come back into here, which is that one, because you can see the blue sleeving on there. That then goes into this actuator, which will then switch on the pump, etc., because we've also got another live from there which is coming back and into the pump. That's coming out that black cable there. So I'm gonna link it out in the stat. In fact, we'll do that now because the power is, yep, power's off there. So let's link these out. So in theory, let me get this. Let me just take this sleeving out for now. So open this terminal up a bit more, and then just put both of these into one. I mean, the terminals are quite small, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to fit them both in. Right, let me do that and come back. Okay, so I've got those linked out in there. So now, when I flick this switch, this pump should come on. Bingo. don't know if you guys can hear it on the video, but that pump is now spinning. So basically the way this has been wired up previously, this Tado was never talking to the old boiler. All this was doing was just basically sending a switch live back and forth to this pump, because the way the customer had been using it before is that they could only get the underfloor heating on when they put on the central heating, which now makes sense because otherwise this pump is just going to basically keep spinning, keep circulating the water in the underfloor heating side, but it's not actually pulling any heat from the boiler. So now we need to basically try and get a cable from here back to the boiler, so that we can now get this stat to actually control the underfloor heating zone valve, which will then kick the pump on and get it to do its thing. Should be interesting. Let's see how we get on with this. Okay, update. So before, this was the permanent supply just feeding this fuse spur, so remove that, turn this off from the consumer unit because it's got its own breaker, terminate it safely. We're gonna put that into a junction box or whatever later on, but that's dead. What I've done now is we've got this cable which we've actually taken all the way from the boiler, managed to feed it through here. So that is basically going to now be powering our Tado room stat, this pump, this cylinder stat, this actuator, and the zone valve for the underfloor heating. So coming in from here, so this is our main 5-core cable. Going to be using the grey as our hot water on, which is what it's on from there, but that's actually going to be our underfloor heating on. So that's from there is going to connect onto the grey here, which is now connected onto our common, which is our common on here. So now when this thermostat flicks on, that's going to send power to normally open, which is the sleeve blue. That will then come back here, and that sleeved blue is that middle one there. So that's our switch live now, so that's powering. The black, which I'm going to connect back onto the boiler side as a switch live, so that's going to connect to the brown on the underfloor heating zone valve. Then we've got the other two browns which are connecting to the actuator and the pump. So now I've done all my wiring here, obviously neutrals are together, earths are together. Going to tidy all this up in a minute, but leaving it open for testing purposes. Now I'm going to go on the other side and wire this 5-core cable into the wiring center, and you see when I do it, it will all make sense hopefully. So back at the wiring center, this is our cable coming from the underfloor heating side. So obviously earths and neutrals are all fine. There's no permanent live because we don't need a permanent live there, we only need a switch live. So from here, our hot water on, which is actually our underfloor heating, that's the grey cable, it's coming into here, and that grey cable is connected with this grey cable, which is our common on that underfloor heating room stat. When that comes on, it will flick over to the black wire. That sends a signal back to here, so that's this one here, going to the brown on the motorized valve for the underfloor heating, and that will then motor over, click, send power down to the orange. That will then send power down to the boiler, and it should come on for underfloor heating. So we're going to put all the covers back on, we're going to test the stats, and then tidy up all the cabling. Okay, so we're just testing the underfloor heating side. So you can see on the thermal imaging camera, we've got heat going through the underfloor. So all these loops are all getting nice and hot. The only issue we're having at the moment is this Tado system. We've basically tried to use it as a twin channel programmer for each zone valve, but it seems to have a mind of its own. We've been trying a bit of jiggery pokery with it, and it just doesn't seem to work properly. We've even put on the old extension bridge to try and get that to independently work the underfloor heating zone valve, but it still doesn't seem to be doing. It's really frustrating because everything's wired up properly. I'm not a fan of these Tado kits. There's always problems with them, to be honest.
Makes
I
two of
don't know
us.
if anyone else has had any issues with them, but if this was a Nest or a Hive or any other stat, it shouldn't have any problems. But there's not even any proper UK support for Tado, so we're trying what we can do, but I think we might have to change this to a different brand of stats and get rid of this Tado system, but we're going to keep trying plugging away a bit and see what we can do. So this is the issue that we're having with this. There's no central heating demand. So this is the wireless receiver. So it's 15.4 degrees. The heating is off. However, from here, it's getting a heating demand. And this heating zone valve is open. Doesn't matter.
Now it's shut.
Okay, now it's turned itself off. So I don't know, either there's a really long delay or this thing just has a mind of its own. I don't know if anyone can shed some light on this Tado useless piece of shit. If I turn that up now, in theory, that should now click on here for the heating side.
That's going to be wired to the other one, isn't it?
No, okay, so that's now come on. Now that's opening. But before, it just keeps coming on and off on its own. So I don't know if this is a coincidence that's working now, and then we've had this before, we've got it working, we think it's working, then it goes off by itself, and it comes on by itself.
Fucking the brother, pump modulation is set to a minimum as well.
So yeah, it's kind of doing our heads in at the moment. This is it. This is how we've managed to get it to work, and this is how it's going to stay for the foreseeable future. So where I was trying to use the new Tado wireless receiver as a twin channel programmer and using the hot water side to control the underfloor heating manifold, for some reason it just wasn't working. It should be straightforward, where this is just working as a time switch basically for the hot water, which is actually controlling the underfloor heating zone valve. So this, when you give it a demand that hot water is on, that should have sent power down the grey to the wired thermostat for the underfloor heating, and then come back on the grey to give it a switch live, which it was doing, but it then kept having a mind of its own and coming on and not turning off, or turning on when we don't need it to, or turning off when we don't need it to, and God knows whatever. We've tried all the different settings on this. Tado's actual customer service and help support team is rubbish. They haven't got a clue. They're literally just reading off a script. So what we've reverted to is using the old extension bridge again, which I took off upstairs, brought that downstairs, and basically wired the underfloor heating wired thermostat just like a combi boiler. So we've got our neutral, live, and central heating on. So neutral, live, central heating on, and now instead that is going back to the common on our underfloor heating room stat, which then comes back when we turn it up to give us a demand for underfloor heating. That turns off and on when it needs to. This turns off and on when it needs to, and everything seems to be working. The one thing that we have noticed is that with the Tado, this one in particular, whenever you give it a demand, there's literally, I think it takes about a minute or 2 minutes for this to click on or off. So you think that you've done it and it's not working, but it is working. It's just got a really, really long delay on it. So yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm just going to put the cover back on this, power everything back on, put the covers on, and then Dee's gonna tidy up all the wiring and neaten up a bit. My job here was to basically move that wiring center from upstairs to downstairs, get both zone valves working independently, because as I explained initially, the underfloor heating would only work when you turn the central heating on. So now we've got them working both independently. My job here is done. I'm gonna start making my journey home, which in traffic is probably going to take me about an hour and a half. And yeah, Dee's gonna just tidy up the wiring and just make it look a bit neater. So yeah, there you have it. What should have been a fairly straightforward wiring job has turned out to be a bit of a nightmare, and it's down to the shit Tado compatibility. If it was a Nest, Hive, or any other room stat program or combination, whatever, it wouldn't have been a problem. I would have been out of here hours ago. But hey ho, you learn from experience, and I will not be installing Tado again, and I will not be recommending it to any of my customers either. Okay, I've got everything all wired up, all powered on, boilers on. Now I'm going to show you how long it actually takes for this to talk to this. So let's set the temperature Right, set that to 25. Now let's wait. We want this one here to light up. Okay, and now that zone valve is opening. That was actually a lot quicker than what it took last time. So that will click on. There we go, central heating active. And the boiler's starting to do its thing. I'll let that fire up. It's doing its thing, pump over on. Come on. You can see the frustration on my face. I'm just so tired today. This should have been like a half-day job. I allowed for a full day, but I didn't realise we were going to turn into, well, get into this much trouble with the bloody Tado system, but it is what it is. I'm just doing these final tests now, and hopefully that should sort it out. Just make sure this zone valve isn't opening. Nope, that's still shut. That's still open. Central heating active. There we go. Boiler's fired up. Good stuff. Right, now I'm going to turn the heating off from here. So let's turn that down. Let's see how long it takes for that to click off. This is what I mean. Because of this delay, there you go. Now that zone valve's turned off. Now that's a lot longer than what it should normally take when any other stat that I've used. It normally just comes on and off. Right, now underfloor heating. Let's go and pop that on. So underfloor heating is a wired stat. So let's turn that on. Right, now let's go check, and that's telling this to come on. See what I mean? Not yet. Oh, it's calling me now. Right, here we go. Now that's starting to move. Right, boiler should start doing its thing again. Central heating active. So that's going to fire on for the underfloor heating now. Because last time what was happening, when we had it all wired into here, for some reason when the underfloor heating was coming on, the central heating zone valve was coming on as well, but now you can see that's not. So we've had to basically split this into the two different receivers. Right, that's going to go and do its whole thing again. So I'm going to go and turn the underfloor heating stat down again. So let's turn that down. That's off. So normally you'd expect that zone valve to be shut by the time you get back, but it's only just now that's shut, and it's killed the demand on here. So there we have it. It's finally working. Not exactly how I would have liked. I would have liked it to have it all running off just one receiver, but luckily we still had the existing one, so we're able to get a way around it. But yeah, it is what it is. It's working. Like I said, Dee's going to tidy up all those cables. I'm going to pack up my stuff and start making my way home. Hope you guys have found this video interesting and useful. As you can see, not every job always goes to plan, but that's why you got to allow extra time for it. Main thing is we got it done in the end. It's all working. kind of as it should be. The main thing is the customer's now got independent control of the underfloor heating and the central heating, whereas before it was literally underfloor heating could only come on when the central heating was on. So, job done. So I'm finally back in the van. Journey time to get home is 53 minutes, so it's not as bad as I thought it would be, past the rush hour now. So yeah, that's me done. If you guys have enjoyed watching this video, or just enjoyed watching me struggle and sweat, whatever, please hit the subscribe button, please like, please drop a comment if there's any tips or suggestions or any constructive criticism, not keyboard warriors, please. Yeah, just leave a comment below and catch you on the next one.